Hello amigos! Today we are doing a topic many of you have been asking about – braking in the middle of the corner and trail braking. There is quite a lot of confusion around this subject. Some riders are scared to even touch the brakes mid-corner like it's a death sentence, while others treat trail braking as the ultimate super technique which must be used always and everywhere. As it usually is, neither extreme is entirely true. Instead of sticking to dogmas, let's break this topic down and explore what really happens when we brake mid-corner and how we can use it to our advantage. But first of all, why do we need to brake mid-corner at all? What's wrong with the normal way of cornering, which is taught in beginner courses? It's the so-called slow look press and roll method. With this method, we do all our braking before the corner, turn our head and look through the corner, apply counter steering by pressing the inside handlebar, and roll on the throttle gently to accelerate through the turn. Job done! Great! But what happens if it's a blind corner, concealed behind some trees or a cliff or something like that? What if we can't look through the entire corner? Or it may be decreasing radius curve, for example. It can initially appear rather gentle and then halfway through suddenly become sharper. If we don't somehow anticipate that, it's logical to assume we also didn't slow down enough before entering this corner. Theoretically, you can say, well, just take it easy and slow down more before each corner, just to be on the safe side. That's not a bad idea, but we can't slow down too much either. Remember, we still have traffic behind us, and we certainly don't want to be rear-ended by some distracted pensioner. Plus, the fact that we have said pensioner on our tail while riding a bike should be at least a bit worrying. And on top of that, if it's a blind corner, we can have all sorts of stuff in the middle of it. Sand, mud, rocks, fallen trees, cows, tractors, cyclists, U-turning cars and stop oil protesters. We should be prepared for even most improbable things. In this case, we can't just go through a corner normally. We will simply be forced to slow down at some point. We can either slow down by using brakes, if you know how, or we can gracefully lay her down, like we see in all those crash videos. With all that being said, while we certainly can ride using the slow look press and roll method most of the time, sometimes we simply must be able to brake mid-corner. And it's always better to learn it in advance, not when we're already in the deep end. So, what really happens when we apply the brakes mid-corner? First of all, when we brake, we create a weight transfer. In case of braking, this means the bike's weight shifts forward when we brake. Remember how, when we were practicing hard braking in a straight line, the front suspension collapsed, pushing the front tire into the asphalt really hard, creating lots of traction in the front tire contact patch, and the rear wheel could even lift off completely. The very same process happens when we apply brakes in the middle of a corner. Slowing down loads the front tire, simultaneously increasing its overall traction, while at the same time unloading the rear tire and reducing its grip. Since in a corner we can't normally brake as hard as in a straight line, the weight transfer happens to a lesser degree. Usually we can't do stoppies mid-corner, but still, under braking, the front tire contact patch gets the majority of available traction. That's why even while our bike is leaned over, the front brake has way more stopping power than the rear one. The rear brake still has its uses, especially at lower speeds, but it's usually not our go-to tool for slowing down in a corner quickly. But, and this is a big but, we have to use it correctly. When using the front brake mid-turn, the key is to be smooth and progressive. We don't just grab the brake lever suddenly, we squeeze it gently, gradually increasing pressure. This gives us the necessary time for the weight transfer to happen and load the front tire properly, helping it to maintain traction. If we just grab the brake suddenly, without giving time for the suspension to compress and the weight transfer to happen, we can easily overwhelm the front tire, causing it to lose grip and slip. That's how we end up with a low-side crash. If instead of the front we stomp on the rear brake, it's even worse. Remember the weight transfer. Under braking, the rear wheel unloads, which means it has less traction and can take less braking force. Now it doesn't take much to lock up the brake and start skidding. We can slip and low side. Or, if we start to skid and then let off the rear brake too quickly, the tire can suddenly regain traction, turning our bike into a catapult. This is called a high-side crash, and it's certainly not fun. Luckily, we can still use the same approach as we used on the straight line, the so-called progressive braking, when we gradually increase the pressure on the front brake as the front tire loads more and more. Even though we can apply significantly less braking while cornering compared to straight-line braking, we can still potentially brake surprisingly quickly. To put into perspective how much we can brake, let's look at a concept called the traction circle. If we look at the contact patch of the tire, there is always a limit, a maximum traction force that we can achieve before our tire starts to skid. This force is limited by two things: the load on the tire and the coefficient of friction, which in turn depends on the tire compound, pavement quality, temperature, etc. This amount of traction can be spent to accelerate our wheel in any direction. We can open the throttle and go forward, we can apply brakes and slow down, or we can lean our bike and turn left or right. Also, we can do any combination of the all above. We can turn and accelerate, or turn and brake at the same time, to a certain degree. All these possible actions form a circle called the traction circle. Anything outside this circle will lead to a loss of traction. For example, if we brake too much or lean too much, we lose traction and low side our bike. But anything inside this circle we can do. For example, we can lean 50% and brake 50% at the same time, and we'll be well inside the circle and even have plenty of extra grip to spare. Just to give an idea of how much we can brake in the corner, if we lean about 70% of the maximum lean angle, we can still apply roughly 70% of braking force before we run out of traction. Of course, this assumes ideal conditions. In reality, we have to give some safety margin, but it still shows us that even when cornering, we can brake quite a lot. As long as we are smooth on the brake, don't snatch it, and don't exceed the threshold limit of our traction circle, we will be fine. Now, let's look at one more thing that confuses a lot of riders: the fact that when we apply the front brake in a corner, the bike tends to stand up. This happens because when the bike is leaned over, the tire's contact patch is no longer directly under the bike, it's offset due to the lean angle. When we apply the brake, the forces act on that offset patch, forcing the front wheel to turn more inside, thus creating an effect similar to counter steering, which makes the bike stand up. But despite making our bike stand up, this doesn't necessarily mean we will go wide. If we apply brakes smoothly and progressively, the bike also slows down at the same time as it stands up. This reduction in speed tightens our turning radius, effectively cancelling out the standing up effect. As a result, our bike doesn't go wide and more or less stays on its line. When braking in a corner, it's especially important to keep our arms as loose and relaxed as possible to allow the front end to steer itself and stabilize the bike. Fighting the handlebars and preventing the bike from standing up can very easily lead to a loss of traction on the front wheel and the low side. Wonderful! Now that we discussed what happens when we brake in the middle of a corner and how to do it correctly, let's talk about one more closely related subject, the so-called trail braking technique. A lot of people are confused about what it is and how it should be used. Some people think any mid-corner braking is a trail braking, while others think it's a very advanced, super complicated riding skill that normal riders can't even begin to comprehend. Some people swear by using it in every corner, while others say that you should never ever use it on public roads. Opinions, opinions. Let's analyze it and decide whether we need it or not. So, What exactly is the trail braking technique and how it is different from simple braking mid-corner, which we discussed earlier? Trail braking originates from racing as a way of improving lap times. Originally, trail braking was not so much a braking technique, but more of a way to delay braking after a fast section and carry more speed into a corner entry. This technique is not even exclusive to motorcycles, it is used in car racing as well. As opposed to the more traditional method where we do all our braking before the turn, then enter the turn and accelerate as we see the exit, in trail braking we continue to brake as we enter the turn and tip in the bike, gradually releasing the brakes as we increase the lean angle. For track riding, this may give us several advantages. We can start braking later. By gradually releasing the brakes as we lean more, we make the weight transition from the front tire to the rear a bit smoother, and by compressing our fork under braking, we shorten the wheelbase and make the steering geometry steeper, which additionally helps us to lean a bit faster. That's all great, but at the same time it's quite difficult to pull off. Trying to manage a precise amount of braking power as you lean your bike close to the edge of traction limit requires a lot of skill and practice. Being a bit too greedy with the brake can easily lead to a low side. Fortunately, in street riding, we are usually nowhere near the limit of traction, so trail braking for street riding takes on a rather different meaning. It is no longer a way to shave off a fraction of a second from a lap time. Now it's more of a way to improve safety. How does it look on the road? Again, as opposed to the classic slow look press and roll method, we keep some pressure on the front brake as we lean our bike. But since we are not on a track and we don't need to lean to the maximum lean angle, we can keep some amount of braking even through the whole turn if we want. More so, we can modulate the amount of pressure on the brakes as we see fit. If at any moment in the turn we need to slow down more, for example, if there is an obstacle mid-corner, we can gradually increase the pressure on the brakes and our bike will slow down more. We can quite easily do it because we were pressing the front brake the whole time, so we kept the front tire loaded, and it has plenty of traction. That's the main advantage of trail braking over simple mid-corner braking. When we simply brake mid-corner, we have to go through the whole process, release the throttle, gradually apply the brakes, wait for the suspension to collapse, wait for the front tire to load properly, and only then apply significant braking force. On common road bikes without high-tech suspension and high-performance tires, this actually takes a significant amount of time. With trail braking, on the other hand, as we go through the corner, we are already compressing the suspension and loading the front wheel, so we can apply the front brake more efficiently. This ability to apply braking force mid-corner offers us a lot of options if something goes wrong. For example, in decreasing radius turns, which I mentioned in the beginning, if we are going through the turn and realize that it suddenly becomes tighter, we can simply add more braking and lose a lot of speed. And less speed means a tighter turning radius, which is exactly what we need in this case. Another good example where trail braking would be beneficial is riding downhill on a winding road. Again, a lot of people can feel a little intimidated by this, but with the trail braking, riding downhill is not an issue. We can just add a little more braking, so our bike stops accelerating too much. Another case that can be solved by trail braking is an obstacle mid-corner. Because in street riding we are not leaning to the absolute edge, we still have a lot of spare traction left for braking, so we can even stop mid-corner completely if we need to. We can add more and more braking force as we bring our bike more and more upright. In this case, we will not go wide, because as we are slowing down, our turning radius decreases. Slowing down and standing up cancel each other out, and we end up with a constant curve. As you can see, trail braking certainly has its uses. It is not the one and only solution though. I have to admit that in last few years trail braking has become a sort of buzzword that some people, like me for example, throw around to appear smarter. I know what trail braking is, I'm a real serious rider, you know. Trail braking every corner, baby. But in reality, we don't need to use trail braking for each and every possible corner. For example, when we use trail braking, we are applying the brakes for some time, even after we enter the corner, right? That means we must lose some speed. But what if we're already riding pretty slow? In most cases, if we are just doing the speed limit and it's not a steep downhill corner or something like that, we don't really need trail braking. We can simply go through the corner at the same speed without braking or accelerating. And if there is something sketchy in the middle of a corner suddenly, we can also just brake and slow down normally, like we discussed earlier, without using trail braking. So, while trail braking is useful, it doesn't mean we must always use it everywhere. I just feel like I need to say all this, because quite often you can hear that trail braking is some super magical thing that automatically solves all problems. It's not. Alright, that's pretty much it for this video. All I have to do now is to say a big thanks to our sponsor, Ultramax Cell. If you are still riding in basic thermal wear, you are certainly missing out. Ultramax Cell has taken it to the next level with their high-tech thermal base layers, making them especially appealing for us, motorcycle riders. These thermal base layers are made with an advanced polypropylene fiber woven into a 3D honeycomb structure. This material allows the layer to wick away moisture and quickly evaporate it to keep you cool in the summer. And when it's cold, the honeycomb structure traps more air around your body, keeping you warm. Basically, it helps you to stay comfortable no matter what the weather throws at you. In my personal opinion, they are a real game changer. I'll leave the Amazon link in the description along with their direct contact, so you can ask them any questions and potentially get better deals depending on your location. On that positive note, on that terrible disappointment, it's time to wrap it up. Thank you for watching, ride safe and have a wonderful day. Bye!